Poor cleaner mocked for bringing her son to work, but when the boy saves the millionaire's daughter from an accident, everyone is shocked. Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. Rain lashed against the enormous glass windows of the corporate skyscraper as the 30-year-old cleaner adjusted her worn apron and held tightly to her young son's hand. The 4-year-old boy looked curiously at the gleaming, spotless hallways, so different from the cramped apartment where they lived in the outskirts of the big city. Well-dressed employees passed them with barely disguised looks of disdain, whispering among themselves about how inappropriate it was for a child to be in that corporate environment. She ignored the unkind comments, concentrating only on doing her job with the same quiet dedication as always. She'd been cleaning those offices for 3 years, ever since the boy's father disappeared upon learning about the pregnancy, leaving her alone to face motherhood and the struggle for survival. She worked 3 different jobs, cleaning offices in the morning, cleaning houses in the afternoon, and washing dishes in a diner at night, all to ensure that her son never went without. On the top floor of the building, the 30-year-old millionaire businessman reviewed contracts in his luxurious office, surrounded by screens displaying real-time stock quotes. His impressive wealth had been built through shrewd investments in stocks and diversified holdings, but all that wealth seemed empty since he'd lost his wife in an accident 6 months ago. The pain of the loss was still fresh, especially when he looked at his little 4-year-old daughter, who was playing silently in a corner of the office. The girl was fragile and small, appearing only 2 years old due to the premature birth that almost cost her life. Since her mother's death, she had been practically glued to her father, accompanying him to the office because she couldn't bear to be away from him without having anxiety attacks. The hired nanny tried to take care of her, but the child only calmed down in her father's presence. That rainy afternoon, while the cleaner was tidying up the offices on the lower floor, the millionaire's little daughter managed to slip away from the nanny's attention during an important call her father was on. The girl, curious and oblivious to danger, ran towards the open window of the office, fascinated by the raindrops hitting the glass. Her small, clumsy steps led her dangerously close to the opening. As fate would have it, the cleaner and her son arrived on the top floor at that moment, bringing cleaning supplies requested by the secretary. The boy, with his 4 years and surprisingly sharp reflexes, noticed the girl moving towards the danger. Without hesitating, he let go of his mother's hand and ran, managing to pull the millionaire's daughter away from the open window just as she tripped and almost fell from the 20th floor. The businessman, who had finished his call and was desperately looking for his daughter, arrived just in time to witness the heroic scene. His heart nearly stopped as he watched his precious child being saved by an unknown boy, the son of an employee he didn't even know existed. The well-paid security team had completely failed, but a poor child had shown courage and reflexes that saved his daughter's life. The gratitude he felt was overwhelming, mixed with a strange feeling as he watched the cleaner. She hugged her heroic son while checking to see if the girl was all right, her eyes revealing a maternal tenderness that touched something deep in his chest. There was a quiet strength in that woman, a dignity that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. Moved by impulses he couldn't explain, he immediately offered her and her son a better apartment, as well as a financial reward for the boy's heroic act. Her answer surprised him completely, a proud but polite refusal. She thanked him, but made it clear that she didn't need charity, just the job she already had. The unwavering determination of that woman intrigued him deeply. He was used to people accepting anything he offered, driven by greed or need. But she was different, preferring to keep her hard-won dignity rather than accept help she considered a handout. In the following weeks, he found himself making excuses to go down to the floors where she worked. He discreetly observed her quiet dedication, The loving way she treated her son, the respectful upbringing she demonstrated even in the face of disrespectful comments from other employees. Something unexplainable was growing in his chest, a feeling he had long thought dead, along with his wife. The tension increased when he discovered that the cleaning supervisor, an envious and malicious woman, was creating difficulties for the cleaner, claiming that children didn't belong in the corporate environment. The threat of dismissal loomed over her, and he knew he needed to intervene discreetly to protect the job of the woman who had saved his daughter. The situation was becoming complicated in ways he had never imagined possible. The millionaire's intervention was subtle but effective. A discreet conversation with the human resources manager ensured that the envious supervisor was transferred to another sector, far from the cleaning team. The cleaner never knew that her continued employment had been secured by the interference of the man whose daughter her son had saved. She only noticed that the problems stopped suddenly, allowing her to continue working in peace. The weeks passed with a strange dance of approach and withdrawal. He made increasingly elaborate excuses to be on the floors where she worked, meetings that could take place by video conference, documents he needed to pick up personally, unnecessary equipment checks. She pretended not to notice, but she felt the weight of his gaze on her back as she cleaned the rooms. The attraction was mutual and undeniable, although both fought against it. He represented everything she could never have: wealth, power, social status. She symbolized a simplicity and authenticity that he had long lost amidst business and social obligations. The chasm between their realities made any approach dangerous and painful. During this period, the children developed a pure and innocent friendship that further complicated the situation. The millionaire's daughter, previously shy and withdrawn, began to smile again in the boy's presence. He protected her with a fraternal instinct, teaching her simple games and sharing the few sweets his mother managed to buy. The transformation of the girl was visible. She spoke more, laughed often, and even began to eat better. The businessman watched this change with a divided heart. Seeing his daughter happy again was all he wanted, but it meant that she was becoming deeply attached to the cleaner's son. Any future separation would be traumatic for both children, creating a dilemma that kept him awake at night. The first major twist came unexpectedly. During one of the nightly cleanings, when the building was almost empty, he discovered that medical expenses in the boy's name were being paid anonymously by his company. The discovery infuriated him, not with her, but with his own lack of transparency. He had instructed his assistant to discreetly take care of the costs of the treatment the boy needed after being injured during the heroic rescue, but he didn't expect her to find out. The confrontation took place in his office after hours. She came up determined, with the boy sleeping in her arms, ready to return every penny she could. Her eyes flashed with anger and humiliation at discovering that he had invaded her privacy and tried to buy her gratitude without her knowledge. The discussion was intense and emotionally charged. She accused him of trying to turn her into his personal charity case, of thinking she was incapable of taking care of her own son. He tried to explain that he had acted out of gratitude and genuine concern, that he had no intention of humiliating her. The words became harsher, the accusations more personal. It was during this confrontation that the physical proximity and emotional tension exploded into something much more dangerous. They were too close, the emotions running too high, the feelings suppressed for weeks finally finding an outlet. The kiss happened inevitably, desperately, charged with all the passion and frustration they had both tried to stifle. For a moment, nothing else existed beyond that touch, that connection that transcended social differences and the barriers they had built. But reality hit them like a bucket of cold water. She pulled away first, horrified with herself, grabbing her sleeping son and leaving without saying a word. The following weeks were a silent torture for both. They avoided any eye contact, pretending that the moment of passion had never existed. She changed her cleaning schedules to avoid meeting him, while he immersed himself obsessively in work, analyzing stock market charts until the early hours so as not to think about what had happened. But the children, oblivious to the adults' drama, continued to demand each other's company. The millionaire's daughter constantly asked about her little friend, and the boy cried because he no longer saw the little friend. The emotional pressure created by the children forced awkward and painful encounters between the adults. The tension reached a critical point when the millionaire's ex-mother-in-law, a bitter 60-year-old woman, unexpectedly appeared in his office. She had lost her daughter in the accident and considered her granddaughter as her only connection to the deceased. She had always disapproved of his decisions as a father, finding him too liberal and irresponsible. During the surprise visit, the ex-mother-in-law witnessed an apparently innocent scene, the cleaner delivering documents she had found during cleaning while the children played together in a corner. But her experienced and malicious eyes captured something more in the way they looked at each other, in the palpable tension between them. The threat came in the form of an apparently polite conversation. The ex-mother-in-law mentioned casually that a granddaughter needed stability, a suitable family environment away from inappropriate influences. Her words, although veiled, were crystal clear in their intention. Any involvement with an employee would be used against him in a battle for the child's custody. The businessman knew she had the resources and connections to make his life a legal hell. More importantly, he knew that a legal battle would deeply traumatize his daughter, who had already suffered too much from the loss of her mother. The emotional blackmail was perfect and devastating, forcing him to choose between his heart and his daughter's safety. The millionaire's decision was cruel, but he believed it was necessary. The morning after the ex-mother-in-law's threat, he called a meeting with the entire cleaning team, pretending he had discovered irregularities in the security procedures. During the formal and cold conversation, he addressed the cleaner as if she were just another employee, dismissing any indication of previous closeness. His eyes didn't meet hers once during the meeting. He spoke about protocols, about the importance of maintaining adequate professional distance, about how employees of different levels shouldn't mix beyond what was necessary. Each word was a stab in his own heart, but he needed to build an insurmountable wall between them to protect his daughter. She understood the message perfectly. The man who had awakened feelings that she thought were impossible was pretending that everything had been a misunderstanding, a momentary illusion on her part. The humiliation burned in her chest like acid, but she maintained her dignity, responding only with silent nods and continuing her work as if nothing had changed. The following weeks were a period of silent suffering for both. She returned to her routine of 3 jobs, working to exhaustion so she wouldn't have time to think. At night, when she finally got home, she found her son asking about the little friend from the office, and her answers became increasingly vague and painful. He plunged into business with obsessive intensity, expanding investments in technology and renewable energy sectors, diversifying his portfolio as if financial success could fill the void he felt. His applications yielded millions, but each profit seemed meaningless when he looked at his daughter, who had returned to silence and sadness after losing her little friend. The social pressure intensified when photos of the two of them together began to circulate discreetly among the business elite of the city. Someone had captured apparently innocent moments, him talking to her in the hallway, the children playing together, glances that lasted longer than professional. The gossip spread like wildfire, creating malicious speculation about the relationship between the millionaire widower and his employee. During a mandatory charity dinner, he was confronted by fellow entrepreneurs who made cruel jokes about his supposed fling with a cleaner. The insinuations were poisonous, suggesting he was squandering his daughter's wealth on inappropriate whims. Each comment was torture, especially since part of him wanted to publicly defend the woman he had learned to love. The situation deteriorated when the ex-mother-in-law appeared again, this time accompanied by a lawyer specializing in family law. The conversation was direct and threatening. She had collected evidence of his alleged inappropriate involvement and was prepared to question his ability as a father. The threat of a legal battle for the custody of the granddaughter was real and imminent. Desperate to protect both the cleaner and his daughter from the devastating public scrutiny that would follow, he made the most painful decision of his life. Through the Human Resources Department, he discreetly arranged her transfer to a partner company in another district, with better salary and working conditions, but far from his daily presence. The news of the transfer came to her like a lightning bolt. She understood immediately that she was being removed from his life in a definitive and elegant way. The offer was too generous to refuse. A better job, more flexible hours, the chance to spend more time with her son. But the emotional price was devastating. On her last night working at the skyscraper, she cleaned each office with extra care, as if it were a silent farewell. When she got to the top floor, she found a letter on her desk, unsigned, but she recognized the elegant handwriting. Inside, a painful explanation about protection, about different worlds, about necessary sacrifices. There was also a savings account opened in her son's name, with enough funds to guarantee his college education. The anger she felt was proportionate to the pain. She tore the letter to pieces, left the bank statement on the desk, and walked out without looking back. Her dignity was worth more than any amount of money. He could buy companies, stocks, and real estate, but he couldn't buy her forgiveness or her understanding. The following months brought a painful and seemingly definitive separation. She adapted to the new job, which really did offer better conditions, but each day was a constant reminder of everything she had lost. Her son constantly asked about his little friend, creating an emotional pressure that made her cry, hidden in the bathroom during breaks. For him, each day was a battle against the urge to look for her. He knew where she worked, he had the resources to find her at any moment, but he forced himself to keep his distance. His daughter had returned to her previous state of melancholy, refusing to play with other children and constantly asking about her heroic little friend. His ex-mother-in-law observed everything with cruel satisfaction, believing she had won the battle. During the mandatory weekly visits, she made subtle comments about the importance of making appropriate choices, about how certain people needed to know their place in society. Each word was a painful reminder of the pressure that had forced him to give up his chance at happiness. The breaking point came during a sleepless night when he was reviewing financial reports in his empty office. The numbers on the screen showed constant growth in his investments, but everything seemed empty and pointless. That's when he noticed an urgent medical notification in the company system. His daughter had collapsed at school and was being taken to the hospital. Rushing across the city in the early hours, he arrived at the hospital to find his small and fragile daughter connected to monitors, the doctors talking about urgent tests and possible complications related to her premature birth. His world crumbled around him when he learned that she would need complex, specialized treatment and that the only qualified doctor in the area was someone who had just returned from overseas. The doctor who entered the hospital waiting room was a tall and elegant man, around 35 years old, with dark hair and gentle eyes that carried a mixture of professional competence and personal regret. The millionaire didn't recognize him immediately, but when the doctor introduced himself and mentioned his specialization in pediatrics and premature births, a casual piece of information changed everything. He had recently returned from 5 years of study abroad, leaving behind a family he had abandoned due to circumstances he now deeply regretted. The penny dropped when the doctor asked about the girl's family history and mentioned having a 4-year-old son in the same city, a boy who was born while he was battling a serious illness that almost cost him his life. The millionaire understood immediately. He was standing before the father of the heroic boy, the man who had abandoned the cleaner, not out of cowardice, but because he believed that protecting her was better than subjecting her to the suffering of a possible loss. The girl's treatment proved complex and delicate, requiring weeks of hospitalization and constant monitoring. The doctor-father explained that he would need the presence of people close to the child to maintain her emotional stability during the process. It was then that the millionaire found himself forced to contact the cleaner, explaining the situation and asking her to bring her son to help with the girl's recovery. The reunion at the hospital was devastating for everyone involved. She arrived with her son, visibly shaken to learn that the girl was sick but maintaining the respectful distance that the separation had imposed. The shock came when she recognized the doctor in charge of the case, the father of her son, the man who had disappeared 5 years ago, leaving her pregnant and alone. His explanation was painful and complex. He had discovered a brain tumor shortly before finding out about her pregnancy, and the doctors had given him little chance of survival. He decided to leave without telling the truth, believing it would be less painful for her to lose him as a coward than to watch him die slowly. The experimental treatment abroad had been successful, but had cost him years of recovery and medical specialization. During the weeks of intensive treatment for the girl, the cleaner and the millionaire were forced to spend entire days together in the hospital. The children supported each other. The boy told stories to distract his sick friend, while she found strength to fight the disease in the presence of her heroic friend. The adults cared for the children in shifts, sharing responsibilities and worries. The proximity forced by the medical circumstances caused both emotional defenses to gradually crumble. Whispered conversations during the early hours in the waiting room revealed fears, regrets, and feelings that had never been fully expressed. He confessed how each day away from her had been torture, how he had tried to protect her from social pressure, even knowing that it would destroy them. She admitted that she had understood his motivations, but that the way everything happened had broken her heart. She spoke about the sleepless nights thinking about him, about how she had fought against anger and longing, about how the new job, despite being better, had never managed to fill the void he had left in her life. The doctor, the boy's father, observed the dynamic between them with a mixture of melancholy and understanding. He recognized that genuine love had blossomed between the millionaire and his son's mother, a feeling that transcended social differences and external obstacles. His own 5-year journey had taught him about regret and second chances. The girl's recovery was slow but progressive. The experimental treatment showed positive results, and her condition gradually stabilized. During this period, something fundamental changed in the millionaire's perspective on his priorities. Watching his daughter fighting for her life, seeing the unconditional love that the cleaner showed for a child who wasn't even hers, understanding that the doctor had given up his own pride to redeem himself, all of this made him question the choices he had made. The pressure from his ex-mother-in-law continued, but he began to realize that giving in to her threats meant teaching his daughter that love should be sacrificed for social convenience. What kind of example was he setting for the child he loved most in the world? What kind of man was he becoming by choosing social approval over genuine happiness? The final decision came during a particularly difficult early morning when the girl had a crisis and everyone rushed to the hospital. Seeing the cleaner taking care of his daughter with the same dedication she dedicated to her own son, observing how the two children strengthened each other, he understood that family was not defined by social status or external approval, but by love, care, and mutual commitment. On the last day of the girl's hospitalization, he made the most courageous decision of his life. He requested a meeting with his ex-mother-in-law and her lawyer, but this time accompanied by the cleaner and the doctor as witnesses. He publicly declared his love for her, his intention to build a life together regardless of the social or legal consequences. His ex-mother-in-law was furious, threatening lawsuits and public scandals, but he was prepared. He had consulted his own lawyers and discovered that her threats had little real legal basis. More importantly, he was willing to face any battle for the chance to be happy and give his daughter an example of courage and true love. The doctor, touched by the courage shown by the millionaire, made his own painful but necessary decision. He recognized that he had lost his chance with his son's mother, but he could redeem himself by being a present and responsible father. He gave up any romantic pretensions, committing to building a healthy co-parenting relationship focused exclusively on the boy's well-being. The girl's complete recovery coincided with a radical transformation in everyone's life. The millionaire faced social prejudices head-on, losing some contracts and business partnerships, but gaining something much more valuable: a family based on unconditional love. His investments continued to prosper, but now they had a greater purpose than simply accumulating wealth. The wedding took place in a simple but moving way, in a small ceremony in the garden of the hospital where everything had been transformed. The two children were the ring-bearers, symbolizing the union of two families who had found completeness in each other. The doctor was present, not as an obstacle from the past, but as part of a new, complex but functional family arrangement. The story ended with a touching scene. The new family walking along the city beach on a sunny Sunday, the children running on the sand, while the adults watched with grateful smiles. Two people from opposite worlds had proven that true love knows no social barriers, that the courage to fight for happiness is worth any sacrifice, and that sometimes the greatest riches in life cannot be measured in financial terms, but by the depth of the human connections we build.